Erik Ten Hag's demand for control at Manchester United was a big reason why he got the job in the first place. But under Jim Ratcliffe, things are about to change. And how much control and power Ten Hag will have will also change. And whether he accepts that or not, in my opinion, is quite a make or break reason as to how he fits into this new Ratcliffe version of Manchester United. But in my opinion, I think that new version could actually be a better version for Erik Ten Hag. Now, let me explain in this video. I'm going to run through it. It's something that I've been thinking for a while, and an article from Rob Dawson from ESPN. I'm not using that as the basis for this video, but it's opened up a conversation that I want to have with you. So please let me know what you think in the comments. As always, subscribe if you're new to United People's TV. I'd love to have you on board as part of this community. Now, let's run into it. Because Ratcliffe, of course, there's Brailsford in the background. They've been in Manchester this week. They've been to Old Trafford, and now Ratcliffe has been to Carrington to meet Erik Ten Hag. So the first informal conversation has taken place between Jim Ratcliffe and Erik Ten Hag. There'll be nothing in there I don't imagine anyway. I'm not a fly on the wall. But I can't imagine they're going to have detailed talks about how much control and power. It would be more about how's everything been for the last 18 months, problems, successes, etc. It'll be like an overview. But I want to run through an article that was released by Rob Dawson. And the reason I'm putting this up first because I want a little bit of context on that. Rob Dawson was one of those journalists who was banned by Erik Ten Hag ahead of the Chelsea game for releasing stories about media leaks from the dressing room without giving Ten Hag and Manchester United the right to respond. It was Samuel Luckhurst was banned as well, and Kavis Solihull. So just remember that before you read this article here, just for a little bit of context. I'm not using this as the gospel truth, but in my opinion, it opens a door to a conversation that I think we can have in a little bit more detail here as a community, because it's this point here, right? Sources have told ESPN that Ten Hag is reluctant to give up any power in the new structure, especially his major role in the identification of transfer targets. He's guaranteed a veto on all transfer decisions under the terms of his contract, but his influence has extended beyond that, leading to United signing a number of his former players or players linked with Holland. Now, the first thing I want to say here is every manager should have the ability to veto a transfer. You remember that Ten Hag said this back when he took the role at the start. Maybe you don't remember it, actually, because this is from an interview out in Holland. He said, I set the requirements in advance about how I want to work. If they aren't granted, I won't do it. I'm ultimately responsible and accounted for the results. I don't want to be the sole ruler. I stand for cooperation, but controlling transfers is a condition for me. And at Manchester United, Ten Hag had a lot of control on transfers, but that was because of circumstances. The thing I want to get across straight away, if we had a proper football structure in place, Ten Hag wouldn't have needed to be in anywhere near as much control as he was. We had no one to turn to. What, John Murtough was going to be the man that found us all the perfect signings? No. We leaned on the manager that we brought in, that we trusted to be the manager, and we trusted him with the signings. That was a mistake. But I want to explain here about this concept of two prongs, really. Two prongs. Ten Hag having a power of veto is not a bad thing. All right? I think that's pretty standard, and I would like to keep that for whatever manager it ends up being the manager for the Ratcliffe era, or the first manager. I still hope it will be Ten Hag. But when it comes to Manchester United, we've kind of been making it up on the spot for a long time. Let me quickly summarise the last, 2 years or so. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer came in, and then Ole Gunnar Solskjaer was sacked. Great, sum all that up very quickly. But when Ole Gunnar Solskjaer was sacked in November, Manchester United needed to make a decision. We either brought someone in the immediate term, or we brought an interim in, which gave us the ability to plan for the summer. John Murtough then turned towards Ralf Rangnick, who for me was the right man in the wrong job at the wrong time. There is no way that he was ever the right interim manager. However, could he be the right mind to change the football structure of our club? Absolutely. So I think it felt like that's what United were doing. They were in the short term understanding that Rangnick wasn't the best choice as an interim manager, but because he was going to go into a consultancy role in the future, that's where he would add the value. And remember that Rangnick said, look, Rangnick was probably one of the people who was pushing Ten Hag to come in. He said he's pretty convinced he's the best possible coach you could get right now. And then Manchester United got Erik Ten Hag. And then we asked the questions, how is Ten Hag going to work with Rangnick? Now, he didn't work with Rangnick. And a lot of people are just going to put that at the feet of Erik Ten Hag. And I imagine that was a massive part of it. But there's more to that whole situation, which just, again, summarizes just how much we're kind of making this up on the spot, right? Because the reason Ralf Rangnick took that job is because that consultancy role was part of it, right? We go down here. This is what Man United said at the time. By mutual agreement, Ralf will now focus solely on his new role as the Austrian national team manager. Erik Ten Hag was pretty sort of aloof. Wrong, I don't know what word to use to describe it. Didn't really, but aloof is definitely not the word. It just vague on it, I suppose. But Rangnick, in my opinion, didn't get the role for a couple of reasons. A few reasons. 3 reasons, I would say. Number 1, I don't think Erik Ten Hag wanted to work with him. Number 2, I think Rangnick had been so open and so truthful, I think he had burned some bridges internally. Number 3, he had done so badly as a manager that he had burned a lot of bridges in that sense there. And also, number 4, Man United were making it up on the spot. I'm not sure that the consultancy role was ever truly there, if I'm being completely honest. You remember this bit? The consultancy had been proposed during the discussions when Rangnick became interim manager after Solskjaer was sacked, but it was only formalised right towards the end. I'm not sure that Murto ever intended on giving Rangnick any sort of power, because it would have been Murto's position that was most compromised by the arrival of Ralf Rangnick, because he would have actually been a genuine football director with the experience of modernising clubs, and he would have known what he was doing, rather than Murto, who was given the ability to learn on the job in Manchester United. So while Erik Ten Hag here previously was talking about having the control of transfers, it was a condition for him, you can see right there, he said he doesn't want to be the sole ruler, and he stands for cooperation. And that's why I want to talk about the previous setup that Erik Ten Hag has had and has worked in and successfully worked in before. So some people are going to be looking at this conversation overall here that Erik Ten Hag has got guarantees in his contract. Having a veto is very normal for a manager. Having overall control of transfers is not. That's where you work inside a structure, like working with Van der Sar as a CEO and Overmars as probably the football director there, or at Manchester United, if you work with Dan Ashworth as an actual football director and with Paul Mitchell as a head of recruitment. That then allows Erik Ten Hag to be the coach that I want him to be, the coach that I still think he can be at Manchester United, if he is in the right environment with the correct support network above him in every single direction. From the part owner in Jim Ratcliffe, who will be in control of football operations, to Dave Brailsford, who is going to be the, I don't know what his role will be, but kind of like a chairman, I suppose. And then you've got Jean-Claude Blanc, who's going to be there as the CEO, who somebody like Dan Ashworth will then report into. And Paul Mitchell will then report into Dan Ashworth. And Erik Ten Hag will speak to Paul Mitchell about the signings that he wants to make. And the hierarchy is created. And all of a sudden, Manchester United have a system in place which is far more like the system that existed at Ajax. The system that Erik Ten Hag, right there, back in 2022, said he doesn't want to be the sole ruler. He doesn't want an authoritarian control over every decision like Fergie. That doesn't work in modern football. And for Erik Ten Hag to exist at Manchester United, in my opinion, under Ralf Rangnick, that cooperative approach is necessary, as well as a hierarchy. Erik Ten Hag should be involved, and I've said this a few times now, in the first 10% and the last 10% of any transfer. The 80% in between should have nothing to do with him. The first 10% should be lining out his vision as a team and where the gaps are and the profiles of the players he needs. A powerful, dominant, dual-winning central midfielder. That's a profile. You then tell someone like Paul Mitchell what you want, and Dan Ashworth will help achieve that. But that's not Erik Ten Hag's job to say exactly who he wants. Like during the summer when he said, sign Anthony, sign this player. Ten Hag had control over the names as well as the profiles. That can't exist in a new system. I don't personally think that Ten Hag would actually be too upset with that, because, as I said, he's worked in that environment before. But if he decided that he wanted that total control, then that would, in my opinion, scrap any chance of Ten Hag working in this new Ratcliffe setup. Because no manager at United, I don't think, will have that power anymore. And that's a good thing. And in my opinion, that would allow Ten Hag to simply be the coach that we signed him for. Not the all-purpose manager who came in and dealt with Ronaldo and dealt with De Gea and dealt with Sancho and dealt with everything in between at the same time as doing all the coaching as a takeover and this and that. Get him back to being a coach. And I personally still have faith in him. I know not everybody does. I appreciate that, right? Everybody's entitled to your own opinions. I don't personally think that Ten Hag would be too upset about this idea and concept of a new system with a new sporting director, a new head of recruitment, that it reflects what he had at Ajax, because that's where Ten Hag was at his most, was the best version of himself. That's what I think. I'm interested to know what you think about it. As I said, this article from Rob Dawson, I'm not here taking it as gospel, but I think it opens a door to a conversation around control and power and how, look, what got Erik Ten Hag here in the first place, right? Post Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, then Rangnick came in, and then Ten Hag was recommended by Rangnick, and then he ended up coming in, and blah, 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 blah. What got us there won't get us back to the top. The circumstances are now changing, and Ten Hag's control has to as well. And I don't think it's a bad thing, and I don't necessarily think Ten Hag will see it as a bad thing either. And I'm interested to know what you think about this. So let me know in the comments.